All right. Good afternoon, Acting Chair Garrett and Member Vondroff. The lobby is open and the recording has begun.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and I'm trying to get back to the screen. Okay, so we will open up the Executive Management May 11th team meeting, and I will start with an introduction. Jim, this is your first EMT meeting, correct?
It is.
Okay, so I will start out with it again, introducing Jim
Hopefully it's the last time.
the board and welcoming him to the meeting. I will go through the introduction again that he started last Tuesday. He come to us with 35 years of behavioral health background, 13 years as a provider with Providence, 16 years with King County Department of Community and Human Services. And he was recommended to the board with a letter to Governor Inslee signed by 22 legislators. And I think, Jim, you have had the opportunity to pretty much meet everyone that's part of the executive team. Am I correct?
I believe so. I think if not in person, via some other meeting. So yes, I believe I have.
Okay. Okay. Well, welcome to your first EMT meeting with the executive management team.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm also looking forward to that being perhaps the last time I'm introduced. Feels like I've actually been here for several weeks or months. I don't know how it's possible to be behind in your second week, but it already feels like I'm behind. So it feels like I've been here for a while.
Great. And I hope you enjoyed your first board meeting this morning.
I'm sure I will. Thank you.
Yes. With that, we're going to go into the agenda. And Chandra, I think we have you going first.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Board Member Garrett, and welcome again, Board Member Vondroff. I hope, Jim, that you'll remember, if you're ever waiting for a response from a staff person, this feeling you're having right now of being behind on only your first or second week, I hope you'll remember that and just know that it just keeps getting better from here. I've invited Dustin as my chauffeur to drive the slides today. And we'll just jump right into the data. If you have questions as we go along, feel free to interrupt. I always start with a list of how many licenses we have, although that's licensing's work. It's a good frame of reference for us as we move forward and look at the work that our officers and staff are doing in the field. So as you can see, over 30,000 licensees in the state. Next slide. So we'll start by showing you the number of complaints that we have. You're looking at the bright blue column for the month of April. I provide the other 2 months as a comparison. You can see this does not include COVID-19 complaints, and you can see that complaints in all of the industries were down for the month of April. And then if we look at complaints year to date 2022, you can see that we've had 1,117 complaints, and then 25% of those are related to public safety. I did commit in our last meeting to sharing this slide as a visual representation so that we can celebrate here that our number of COVID-19 complaints for the month of April are 0. So we can all just take a moment to celebrate that. And then I did just want to go ahead, Jim.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying to do a clap as opposed to a raising of the hand.
And I want to point out on the right side of this slide, thanks for going back, Dustin, that if you'll notice the number of contacts in the 14 months that I pulled data for COVID here, we had 52,000 contacts of all types that our officers made, over almost 22,000 hours. And then the number of complaints we received was over 14,000, which means in 1 month we averaged over 1,000 complaints just related to COVID. So I did want to share that data just as a great visual of the work that our officers are doing. Thanks, Dustin. Next slide. An overview of licensee education. I think this is a little out of order, but that's okay. For the first quarter of 2022 was 6,773, and then the second quarter so far, just 1 month in, we're already almost at 2,000. Next slide. So this is an overview. This will show you the education year to date for 2022, and then some of the other work that we do when education is ineffective to gain compliance. And this reflects a third of the year so far as you're looking at numbers. So if we specifically look at education, you can see that we're on target to match last year's number. And when you look at in the middle column, NTCs, and the far right column, warnings, the same thing. The data you're seeing is that we're going to match the work that was done last year. And then if you look in that right column for AVNs, you'll see that we are on target to be higher than in 2021. And when I looked at the data, that is completely driven by compliance checks, which is youth access and making sure that youth in our state under the age of 21 does not have access to products, age-restricted products. And so now we're going to walk through a breakdown of this data. And as we do this, one of the things I want to let you know is that what I'm looking for is a progression to see that our data shows that what we're doing is using education and other tools to help our licensees gain compliance. And then where we're not successful or where public safety is at issue, that's where we're using AVNs. So looking at a breakdown of our education contacts, you'll see that we're on track to provide education similar to what we did last year, except we will have fewer in liquor if we continue exactly on this path. And you'll see that we will almost double what we did in 2021 and in cannabis. And the reason for that, when I look at the breakdown of the data, is our responsiveness to the retail robberies that we've been experiencing in the industry, and then also some operational changes that we've made in that unit.
I do have a quick question.
Yep.
And this is just to help educate me about this. So when you're saying education, are you talking technical assistance essentially? These are opportunities, and are they largely driven by witnessed infractions, or how do the education opportunities come about?
So the answer to your question would be yes. Yes, and yes. So those look like sometimes technical assistance. Sometimes we'll get a complaint, and for example, during COVID, we would get a call that someone was not wearing masks as they were serving customers. So we would respond to that location, and if we observed whatever we observed, a lot of times if people were wearing masks, people were not wearing masks, we start with just providing an education and making sure people know the rules that are supposed to be followed.
Great, thank you.
On the next slide, it's just a breakdown by industry of the number of contacts that are made during the month. So again, the bright blue column is reflective of April for each industry. And then as we look closer at April, on the next slide, you can see the topics that we're providing education. So you'll see that regulatory topics, youth access and public safety, again, those public safety issues that we're really looking for, licensing and permits, and then specifically tobacco education. And then I've broken that down by industry, and it follows the same pattern for each industry, which is really what I like to see when I'm looking at this data. We start to look at a violation breakdown year to date for 2022. And you'll see cannabis on the right's a little bit different because we have an additional tool in that category called a notice to correct. So we're reflecting that data there too. You'll see that when it comes to AVNs and warnings, that we have pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio of the numbers that are being issued. And then if we look at notice to correct, remember those are specific to cannabis. In April, here are the top 5 topics. And so record keeping requirements, their surveillance system, traceability, all really important as it comes to regulating an industry. Although you'll see that we're not seeing a lot of the major public safety youth access issues in this category. At the next slide, you'll see when we start looking at the top 5 categories for violations, we're seeing exactly what I told you I was looking for as we progress through our tools in contacting licensees, and that is these public safety issues. So the top 4 are sale of tobacco products to 21, individual tobacco products, alcohol to a minor, furnishings to persons under 21. And then, of course, selling vapor products from self-serve displays is not technically a public safety violation, but as you can imagine, that's also a way for somebody under the age of 21 to get access to a product. So it is connected. As we move on to look at the topics for warnings, you'll see the same thing. You'll see not quite as serious violations as when we were looking at AVNs, but you are still seeing some important issues that are important to regulating industries. Now we're going to look at alternative dispute resolutions. And if you remember, the goal when we're looking at when we're working with our licensees is that we continue to resolve issues at the lowest level possible. So we continue to do that even through to the end. So if you look over on the left side, you'll see the liquor industry, and you'll see that we resolved 16 uncontested. 1 of our AVNs went straight to formal hearing. 25 of those we resolved at informal, and then 1 went to formal from informal. And then if you look at cannabis, you'll see we resolved 2 that were uncontested, and then 3 through informal hearing, and 1 of those informals went straight to formal. Now we're going to talk about youth access, and I want to just introduce this as saying that compliance checks are conducted based on a nationwide best practice industry standard, and the goal is to reduce youth access across the state. So we take youth with us and attempt to buy product. And I just want to remind you that the percentage of compliance, that's reflective of the industry's work. The number of checks that are conducted are our officers' work, but really that percentage is determined by the industry and how they allow access or don't allow access on those attempts to purchase. So in this case, in April, you'll see that they had a 79% compliance rate. And what that means, out of 225 times that we attempted to buy liquor with someone under the age of 21, 177 times our licensees did not sell liquor to youth, but 48 times we did. And then this is new for us. This is a delivery and curbside compliance for youth access. And so you can see during this process, we're figuring out how we're going to conduct these compliance checks. And also the industry is learning about how the law applies to licensees and how these compliance checks are being done as well. So what this shows you is 7 times out of 10, they did not sell to youth, and then 3 times they did. The other thing that we're learning as we walk through this data is that some areas of the state are doing really well in this area and some areas are not. And then also third-party vendors impacts these numbers. So for example, last week, and this will show up in the May data, but last week we did 7 attempts. And out of those 7 attempts, we were successful 5 times. And so that would produce a number that is 29%. But that will be potentially balanced out later on through the month as we do that in a different area. So it's been very interesting. Ollie, you have a question.
Are we still allowing the alcohol delivery with meals, food, to-go orders, whatever?
Yes. And so we're actually conducting, and I think Justin's here. He's working with a company that's conducting a study too. looking at this data so that we'll be able to report back on how that is going to the legislature.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, it was through June of 2023 that was extended.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's allowed. Justin, go ahead.
Did you want me to jump in? Just real quick. So we have a House Bill 1480 study that's being conducted by CDM, which is a company that's conducting that particular study. It's due back to the legislature by December 1st of this year. And they're trying to take a look at the pre-COVID data for alcohol sales and compliance related issues, as well as community harms. And then they're also looking at post allowance period. And so when the legislature provided the extension on those allowances, which do include the delivery and the takeout aspect, how does that impact the community issues? And so I know that they're taking a look at all of those different types of issues, and that will continue. The study will continue this year, but the allowances are going to continue into 2023, and then the legislature will have to decide whether they want to make those permanent or not. So yes, those do continue, and I think Shauner's probably got other stuff, so I'll bow out.
No, the other night, Cinco de Mayo, whatever night that was, I decided I was going to order my dinner from Cheesecake Factory, and I noticed that the margaritas was no longer on the menu. And I was like, did we stop that? Because they used to have the margaritas, as a to-go.
Yeah. So, the industry is finding challenges and obstacles to overcome as we move along. And that's just some places are deciding not to do it. Or apparently that factory is one of those places.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, Chandra, can we go back one slide?
Yes, sir. Dustin, thank you.
In this particular slide, I'm wondering, do we have benchmarks set of what we're attempting or hoping to achieve in terms of compliance? And then part two of that question is, do we have national standards that we are aware of, and how do we compare to national benchmarks related to youth access and compliance, and not just with liquor, but cannabis, tobacco, other areas?
So as we re-enter, there are goals, and I'll send those to you. And it's actually a really good idea to probably reflect those on the slides. As we have re-entered the post-COVID time where we actually restarted doing these checks because we didn't do them during COVID, we've really just been measuring what's happening. As you can see in November, the liquor industry was at 70%. And because I wasn't here pre-COVID, I think these were 85%. Pre-COVID, but I'll send that to you. And then, yes, this is based on a national standard. And if there are measurements of these nationally, which I haven't seen, we can reflect those on the slide too. Thank you, Jim.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then you, Dustin, can skip ahead to cannabis, and we can look at the cannabis compliance rate. Cannabis had some really good months in December and January, but you'll see in April, out of 41 attempts, 33 times they did not sell, and 8 times they did sell to a person under the age of 21. And then in vapor and tobacco, this one seems to have the most, even historically, have the most fluctuation in the rate. In the month of April, it was at 83%. So 97 times they didn't sell, and 20 times our licensees did sell to youth. This is really just numbers. These are the numbers of times we conducted premise checks at our licensee locations, and then comparing that to the number of licenses, which our licensing director tells me those numbers are a little bit off for right now. And so I'll be adjusting those, but you can see it looks like we were able to visit, in addition to the other work that I've reflected, 8% of our liquor locations, 20% of our cannabis locations, and then 4% of our tobacco and vapor locations. You can go ahead and skip this slide because I'll just address everything in the next one. Thanks, Dustin. This is another opportunity for us to have a positive impact on youth access in our state. And so this is our officers out there checking IDs as they are conducting premise checks or visiting licensee locations for other reasons. And these numbers are just reflected. I'm a big believer that you get what you measure. So we're measuring ID checks. I'm also reporting a little bit on some of the other work that's happening in the enforcement division. We have a CRI unit that does criminal history records checks. And so in addition to all the work that is happening, we also 434 times ran criminal records checks, and those happen for licensing backgrounds and cannabis license renewals. So the month of April. That's work that's happening behind the scenes. Our examiner unit, as you can see, is doing great work supporting the CCRS transition and then some other things that they provide support for the agency. Our FDA unit is interesting because of all these other stats that I've reported for you. Separate from that, based on contracts, we have a team that works predominantly on tobacco and some vapor, and they're out there doing an additional number of inspections, almost 400, as you can see, for the month. And then their compliance rate this month also was 79%. And then I believe in transparency of data. These numbers didn't change this month. We didn't have any additional work to do in the internal affairs arena, but I try to be really transparent about the complaints we received and how they're resolved. And then in the hiring and recruiting, you can see that we're running at 27 vacancies. So any of those slides you saw where numbers were down for numbers of for amount of work, that's going to be a staff impact. We have 13 people in background. We hired 2 in the month of April, and our vacancies are not for a lack of trying and great work, as you can see with just 13 folks pending today in background, and then the number of job fairs and the other things that are happening. If you haven't seen the great work our recruiting team has done with the video that we released in April, you should definitely reach out because it's great work. Also, behind the scenes, our training unit is conducting a large amount of training to make sure that we're current on the things we need to be current on. And
I
then
saw the
finally,
training video yesterday. It was great.
yeah, that is a great video. I'm glad you got to see it. Then finally, just to reiterate the work we're doing in response to the retail robberies, we have finalized an MOU with the Crime Prevention Association. So we're working with local law enforcement to provide training, information, education, and best practices to our retail licensees across the state. And then tomorrow we'll formally announce a contract with Cetricon that where we're providing assessments to our impacted licensees so that they can have suggestions made. Yes, ma'am. I'd be able to help you if you were unmuted.
Okay, so I'm just on this topic, and Brian, I know you're coming up next, but are we sharing what we're doing with other municipalities? And the reason I'm asking is here in Seattle, I know the King County Council, the Seattle Council, other folks are working on this same topic. And when I read some of the things that they are looking to do, it pretty much match what we are already
Yes, ma'am. Well,
doing.
there's a reason for that. So when we started putting together this response and we developed our partnership with the Crime Prevention Association, Seattle was already partway through this process that you're describing. And so
Okay.
Seattle is having their forum tomorrow. And so, tomorrow. And so that's the first one. And we're kind of just tagging on to their production or their event. And so that's why it seems like Seattle's running that particular show, because they really are. They started doing that. And then in all of the other cases, we're kind of taking the lead from there. But Seattle's was already starting to get set up. And so we worked with them. We're partnering with them. And then in the other ones, us in partnership with the Crime Prevention Association will be taking the lead. But that's why it looks like Seattle's kind of driving that train, because they are.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and so we are doing a bunch of communication. And I would just say that all of the great work that's happening in the enforcement division couldn't be done without the partnership of so many others in the agency. We've worked really closely with HR, communications, recruiting, finance, over the past month. So I appreciate all of that. And then of course, I can't end without pointing out and highlighting that Enforcement and Education received the Agency Directors Award at the most recent recognition event. So good job to our staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and congratulations to your staff.
Thank you. Okay, Brian, communications update.
Hi, board members Garrett and Vollendorf. I don't have any slides today, so we follow Chandra, but I can help catch us up a little bit because I've got just kind of a brief update. First off, with the media, Jim, when you and I met on our one-on-one, I kind of talked about the amount of media that this office typically receives. That's been consistent for the last, month here as well, 1 to 2 a day. Just to let you know that the retail robberies continue to be one of the hotter topics that the media wants to talk about. They can come in from anywhere, and they do. On the synthetic THC issue, which consumed so much of our efforts this last legislative session, Cairo TV is doing a follow-up, kind of an in-depth look at that, and came in and sat down with Chair Postman for over an hour last Friday, which is a very long interview in my experience, but they're taking a deep dive into it and they expect to have a story on that. Too much, hopefully I'm not divulging too much for them, but that story is still in production. And then following today's board action, particularly about the social equity rules, I had an immediate call about that from a legal media sort of organization that follows our stuff pretty closely and asked me to talk about that. So just so you understand is that, these meetings are typically followed. Sometimes you'll get media that'll come in, that'll sit on it if there's an interest, but that's ongoing. Some of the big issues that we're working on, as you know, that the rules team is putting together rules to implement House Bill 1210, which is converting the term marijuana to cannabis. Policy performance manager Jessica Dang and myself are sort of leading an effort to work simultaneously to make that change throughout the public facing and internal facing documents, website, intranet, et cetera, to make that happen. And so that you understand is that I've been using the term and many others have been using the term for some time now, but historically we have not necessarily gone back and made all the changes to the website, the documents and things that were produced, in the past. But we're going to make a proactive and concerted effort to make that change and tie it in with the timing of the rule process, which will be final and everything done by August. Update to the social equity page basically today after the repeal of the 102 for where we're at with social equity rules. We're going to make that reflective on our website. Jim, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but we have a social equity page that's on our website. We try and keep that as up to date so that people who are looking for that information can find it clearly and quickly. And we know that there are people that are looking at that regularly. So we're going to get that updated with today's and along with an explanation. Security assessments. This is something that I didn't hear Chandra just talk about. Recently, we've contracted with a contractor that will provide on-site security assessments at retail stores in the Puget Sound corridor. I'm not going to get too much into the details of that because we're actually going to announce that tomorrow. But that is the latest in a string of efforts that the LCB has been involved in to be able to support and help retailers as they've faced, this onslaught of violent armed robberies. And I know both of you are very aware and are following that along the lines, but we've had a number of things to announce recently. Last week, it was our partnership with the Washington State Crime Prevention Association and others. And so this will be another thing that will be valuable, I think, to our retailers. That's going to go out tomorrow. We have a number of things we're setting up to licensees today, and so I did not want to get that in that. But I've been working with the contractor on that. And then I think lastly, just kind of the important is hopefully you're taking a look at the internet pages. Our team, primarily Sam and Brad, worked with DEI manager Jim Weatherly to create a new page that's going to highlight the business resource groups. It's a new section of our intranet, and it's his area to be able to access LCB employees, and they can access the information there and hopefully become more involved in those organizations going forward. So, and also that is a fun thing. We had a recognition event last week in the rain, and my team put together sort of pictures from that and notices of the recipients of the awards, as Chandra just noted, or Division one of the major awards. But if you haven't had a chance to look at that yesterday, take a look, please, because it's fun and that group does good work.
Great.
So that's it. Is there any questions?
Nope.
Nope,
Thank
thank
you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I got to back up. I misread the agenda. So legislator Chris, I had overlooked you. I was looking at the strike through and not the highlight. Sorry about that.
No worries. Good afternoon, board members Garrett and Volendroff. Good to be with you this afternoon. I'll have a fairly brief report as it's not high season for legislative work, but it never goes away. So it is year round. So first thing I'll mention is that committees are quiet. There's nothing currently scheduled committee meetings, but we just finished, in fact, yesterday, a big one. The Senate Labor, Commerce, and Tribal Affairs Committee held a work session, and 3/4 of it, 90 minutes, was focused on the issue that we tried unsuccessfully to address with agency request legislation last session, clarifying and extending the authority of the agency to regulate any and all potentially impairing cannabinoids. So the committee started with a professor from Portland State University with a lot of experience in one of the few centers of significant research in cannabis, and this is chemistry. So his expertise is really relevant to the issues that come up around Delta-8 and other novel, some not so novel cannabinoids from the plant and how they're being used in the marketplace, et cetera. He didn't have a formal presentation, but he led a discussion with them. It was very interesting and somewhat alarming in some regards. He was prodded to offer an opinion, which he studiously tries to avoid doing in terms of recommendations. But he said, yes, these materials should be regulated. And there are what he described as gray areas or a lack of clarity around what various state laws in all the states and nationally provide, allow, exempt or not. It was a really interesting segment. Following that, the state of Oregon's sister agency, the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission, presented. In the state of Oregon, their legislature had passed legislation in 2021 to provide this regulatory umbrella for that agency. And so they have not completed their work, but they've made a lot of progress toward defining what and how they're going to exercise regulatory authority over impairing cannabinoids, including from the hemp industry. And so one of the differences between Oregon and Washington with regard to law in this area is that the Oregon agency has some authority related to hemp that the LCB in Washington does not. So that's one of the barriers, difficulties, challenges that we face that Oregon does not, in addition to having had that legislative approval. We're told by our colleagues in Oregon at the OLCC that part of the reason they had a smooth a path as they did to passage in the legislature is that all the national cartels decided to target Oregon to set up shop for illicit operations, especially around hemp. And so that helped, and it was well enough known that that helped create and sustain the bipartisan support in the legislature for taking these regulatory steps. So the director and the chief policy person for hemp both testified to the committee. Our State Department of Agriculture then provided a brief presentation, and one of the key takeaways there was her emphasis that putting hemp into food products, consumable, is not legal in Washington. Despite the fact that it's being done, it's not legal. Department of Agriculture in Washington oversees the production of hemp, but once that hemp plant is cut, they cease all further regulatory oversight. So there's this gap between post-production and eventual consumer, product and sales and consumption and so forth in Washington. Finally, Justin offered a presentation on our behalf, and Justin did a great job. I'd like, if I may, to share just 2 slides from his presentation. The kind of the key points here I'd like to emphasize. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see.
This is a summary picture of what we put into the development of that legislative proposal. I've got a screen that says video isn't working. I hope that's wrong. So in the upper left corner quadrant, Justin talked about the deliberative dialogues we did last summer. In the upper right, he emphasized the broad support from the industry that our legislation had, as well as support from other types of groups. A number of the kind of efforts and stakeholder groups that we reached out to, and then some of how we went through and revised the bill in light of the feedback that we've gotten from stakeholders. So that was sort of a look at and a response to the committee's interest in how we got to that point, and specifically the criticism that we didn't do our stakeholder work. Respectfully, I would submit that we did abundant stakeholder work, even if we didn't get support from every group out there. The other thing, briefly, just show you is Justin also kind of gave him a look at the way ahead. So in this slide, he's emphasized in the blue some project stages related to rule development around this topic, and in the green, he's emphasizing some of the outreach to the stakeholder communities that we are doing that feeds and supports both the rulemaking and the third area in kind of yellow, the legislative work in anticipation of developing further proposal for consideration next session. So I think all the presentations were very well received. The committee was impressed. They learned a lot. They were pretty engaged. 6 of the 9 committee members were in attendance, and we got some really positive feedback. The Oregon agency also got a lot of positive feedback. So I think it was very good event. Helps build a stronger foundation. And frankly, one of the hurdles we faced last session was, not having a strong enough foundation of knowledge among legislators about what this issue involves, about what's being done to chemically manipulate components of the plant to produce intoxicating substances that are largely unregulated, that can be actually many times more potent than THC or the cannabinoids we're all more familiar with, and then where some of the regulatory gaps are. So that was a big event, a lot of effort put in there. I'll also say that another thing we're working on, if my screen is still showing, I wanted to show you that just a peek at something that, I've been working up to revise our agency legislative request process and timeline. So I just sent this to the board members. We've been kind of revising it recently, and we're now in the phase where we're inviting division directors to work with their staffs to come up with ideas they want us to consider for, potentially legislative requests for next session. We anticipate coming together across a number of places in the agency on June 10th to look at what has been put on the table, do some further refinement of those ideas through middle of July, and then do some outreach to the governor's office. Obviously, check in with board members, further refinements. Eventually, reach out to stakeholders, and the deadline for all of this work is to bring back a fully fleshed out proposal with fiscal note, stakeholder feedback, and all kinds of supporting information by, the deadline's actually September 16th with the governor's office and OFM, but we're targeting the 14th. They're using a new process, a new portal will be used. And so I want us to have at least a couple days leeway to make sure we can work through any technical glitches if they arise. So I will stop sharing there. Couple other quick topics I'll mention. One is something that Chandra did not mention that her staff is involved in. We've begun working toward implementation of the agency request bill that did pass. We jointly requested with Department of Agriculture to create new, more robust quality standards for cannabis testing labs for their accreditation and for their operation in the state. LCB, Department of Health, Department of Agriculture together form a team that will develop those substantive standards and requirements. Eventually, we will connect with Department of Ecology, and those 4 agencies will all have a role in implementing those new requirements and those standards. One glitch that came out of this legislative cycle was all 3 of the agencies on the team, LCB, Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, all had budget requests for new staff to support this work. Department of Health and LCB's budget requests were fully funded on an ongoing basis. And for some reason, we don't understand the Department of Agriculture's budget for this program was not funded on an ongoing basis. It only got one-time funding. So that's a glitch. We're going to need to work out how to work through that, how to manage that, and eventually how to fix it, because this isn't one-time work. This is ongoing, technical, difficult work in an industry that is extremely dynamic, that's changing rapidly, and that we all struggle and lose our breath a bit running to try and keep up with. So the Department of Agriculture will need ongoing support. So we're having conversations with them about how to work through that. And the final topic I'll mention briefly, also on this subject, has come up with cannabis retail store security. We've been working with the governor's office and others on the federal Safe Banking Act to see if we can finally get that legislation across the finish line and into law. We had a meeting with Senator Murray's office. That went extremely well. Senator Murray is very supportive of enacting the Safe Banking Act. I should mention the Attorney General, the Lieutenant Governor, the State Treasurer are all also engaged in and working hard toward this effort. It looks perhaps a little promising that there's some legislation with good momentum dealing with competitiveness that the Safe Banking Act might be attached to, and that's Senator Murray's strategy at this point. The primary impediment right now is among senators who don't want to pass the Safe Banking Act until broader cannabis legalization legislation is enacted. We're supporting that, but we're also trying to make the case for the urgent need for this measure. And toward that end, we've scheduled a meeting coming up next week with Senator Cantwell's staff. And at this point, it's not clear that that she has taken a position yet on this effort to attach safe banking to the America Competes Act and move that forward, even if the broader legalization legislation hasn't yet passed. I will stop there and see if you have any questions. Or if you have comments, I'd love to hear those too.
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment, and that is first, so thank you. I had the opportunity to sit in on the work session. So thank you, Chris, for making me aware of that. It was super helpful. And as a new board member, anytime there's opportunities for me to be involved in sessions like that, where I can quickly get up to speed on complex issues like that, I really want to be involved. So thank you for that opportunity. I thought that the speakers were extremely credible. And Justin did an excellent job of representing the LCB. So again, thank you for that opportunity. And thanks for a very comprehensive update.
I was going to say thank you, Chris. If that's your definition of brief.
Well, I didn't plan to do all that stuff for Justin, but I got carried away. Sorry.
It was nice to
Thank
recognize
you.
this work.
Thank you. Becky, licensing update.
Okay, so I'm actually going to be brief.
Well,
I want to start.
Let's see what the definition of brief is.
I was going to say, let us decide that.
No. So good afternoon, board members. I'm going to start with the piece that I usually don't, and that's recognizing the work that staff have done around giving back to the community, because I think it's an important piece of work that we do and that it rarely gets noticed. And so one of my staff, Brianna Donovan, does the Well-Fed, Well-Read program. And so they just finished. And so a big shout out to our director's office for contributing to bringing in books and food, as well as our staff and licensing. That this year, that it was very successful. We had 35. Actually, I'm going to re-say that, is that we had we were able to give enough books because for every book that we give, 4 books are given out to children. And this year, with the number of books that was collected by agencies, LCB included, there was 920 children that will receive books. So nice. A huge piece of work. A lot of great work by us, 105 pounds of food from LCB, and 232 books from LCB was contributed. So I just mentioned that because, again, it's important to mention the ways that we give back to our community, and that is certainly one of them. Great. So the other piece is that I did that Brian spoke about social equity, and so I'm just going to mention the posting that we recently did, that we posted for a program specialist 5, and that position will be working directly with our licensees and our applicants. They'll be helping in being supportive for the program, that really taking a proactive approach. That we had 9 excellent applicants that went forward for the job. We did our first pool this last week and interviews. And so next week, we're going to do a second round of interviews. But I have to tell you, these folks are fantastic. So we're really excited to get that position filled. It is one that we created, and in hopes to have them on board and helping with all of the work ahead of us. And then in regards to special occasions, so our customer service and customer service unit, that they do all of our special occasions, as you know, that this year already, from January through April of 2022, we have over 1,011 applications this is significantly more than last year, and that's because the world in Washington has opened up again. That last year at this time, we had 350 applications. And so big difference. We know that this is just the beginning of this work that usually it goes all the way into October. With that in mind, we also have been doing quite a few presentations with our enforcement partners. We go out and do those presentations in the community as well as virtual. That we did an event most recently for the Washington Festival and Event Association. They had a lot of questions. Actually, our customer service manager, her piece was the biggest attended, well attended part of that conference. And it wasn't just, of course, licensing, it's also in partnership with enforcement doing that. And then we have another event on the 25th of May. We actually have 2 virtual events. So doing them virtually is very helpful because we can do them back to back. One of that is regarding our new alcohol endorsements for the Washington Hospitality Association. We're going to talk about those endorsements, alcohol to go. And then we are doing a presentation with the Northwest Development Council on auctions and raffles. And so again, when we're able to do that remotely, it's so much easier when it's virtual. We're able to touch more people. And then our liquor unit that, again, you know, that as restaurants want to open up again and new restaurants want to come into business, that we have surpassed what we were pre-pandemic. At this time, in pre-pandemic, we had about 412 applications. Already we have 414. That the concern with that, of course, is that we have a lot of new staff and we are hiring up in our liquor unit. So I always tell our customers and licensees, be patient. We're working as quickly as possible. We usually have those applications done between 60 and 90 days, sometimes sooner than that. But they're taking, you know, that if there's a lot of paperwork we have to get back, then that seems to take a bit longer. But just to know that. And then we are getting ready to license and open a new restaurant and brewery and in the event adjacent to T-Mobile. And I mentioned that for 2 reasons. One is because it's going to be large indoor and outdoor space for a beer producer. That's actually the first African-American brewery in the state of Washington. And so we're looking forward to that. That's called the Box Yard, being open very soon. And then with policy and education, that of course act's throwing. And so we are doing quite a bit of training for our teams, and we'll be sharing that training with our enforcement partners as well, and helping them reviewing what the floor plan looks like, because we want to make sure that there is a safe operating plan for those venues that want to have beer and wine and axe throwing together. And then we have, as you know, I think we've mentioned, we hired some new staff in our MAS and RVP, so our mandatory alcohol service training and our responsible vendor training, that those staff went out and did their first event with K-Grow. So Korean groceries, that even though neither of them speak Korean, that it was a great event. They had an interpreter with them and it was very well attended, that it continues to be, we continue to do that throughout the state, and actually continues to be a big need for folks as well. And then for our MOAs, we have had quite a few MOAs. And I say quite a few because we have over 10 MOAs that are in place now. We've recently approved 2. The first one being Sammamish tribe, that was approved on April 19th. And then the Sioux Settled, and I know I just butchered that tribe, that was approved on April 26th. And these tribes previously held liquor licenses, but both are starting with beer and wine grocery stores. I should say neither one held liquor licenses, but they're both going to start with beer and wine and liquor stores. And I think with that, I'm going to stop. Do you have questions? Are there questions?
Jim, do you have questions? At first, I was gonna ask that you know what she was referring to when she said MOAs, but it looked like you
I did,
caught on. Okay. Yeah.
And we'll be sending some information out to all the board members, just describing the difference between what an MOA is with the tribe versus a compact. So maybe a one pager that's a bit easier to understand, along with, you know, that Jim, both for you, but just for education. It's always really good to re-educate all the board members on the work that we do with alcohol impact areas as well. So developing a one pager for that work that we're doing.
Great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you. And oh, for the record, we have 18,400 retail licenses and 8,200 non-retail licenses. So 26,000 altogether liquor licenses in Washington State right now.
Wow.
So Becky, as part of the training for the axe throwing, staff's gonna go out and see what it's all about.
Well, I'll say probably not.
Well, truth be told, on Sunday afternoon, I actually made a trip to the local axe throwing place and participated. I'm one of those
At
people.
Blade and Timber?
I did. I went to Blade
Okay.
and Timber and spent an hour and a half throwing axes for the purpose of just seeing what it was all about. It was
I've
very.
been trying to get David to do that. Let David know you did that.
I will. I will. And
I will
Becky,
say-
oh, go ahead.
Blade and Timber has a, you know, that their safety plan and the way in which they're set up is, you know, that they have an excellent business plan and safety protocol in place.
Yeah, yeah. Becky, one last thing I'll just say is, and I've already said this to you, but on last Thursday when I was in the office, I was able to wander around the building, and I spent some time in customer service just by happenstance. Of course, they were still in the building, and what an amazing group of people who were, one, a joy to just chat with, and really open to answering questions, and obviously enjoy the work that they're doing. So I just wanted to give recognition to that team and the work you're doing. And there are many other teams within the LCB that I'm sure are just as great, but that's the one I happened to run into that day. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Justin, policy update.
So actually, mine should be a little bit shorter because a lot of it's been covered already. So that's, and I'm not going to rehash everything that you've heard in caucus and the board meeting earlier today. So I won't go into the timelines and projects. So on the kind of global front, what we're doing is we're trying to look at doing some additional outreach to augment the Alcohol and Cannabis Advisory Council type of groups where we may be able to have some smaller policy discussions with different segments of industry. And so over the last month, I've been reaching out to a number of the trade associations. I think I've talked to 14 thus far, and just trying to get some draft concepts together and figure out what would be of value added to them. So once I get through some of this, I'll be able to map something out and present it to both management team and the executive management team to kind of showcase what the thoughts are there. But we wanted to reach out first to say, is this a good idea or is this not a good idea? And is this value added? Because we didn't want to add another set of meetings if they didn't find value to those. And overall, so far, everybody has had a positive response. There's definitely different thoughts about how the structure and frequency and those types of things should be set up. So we'll have to go through. We may end up having to do a survey or something like that to try to fine tune some of those perspectives. So we're working on that. We've also been looking at the continuing to find opportunities to address the patient concerns around medical product access. So I've reached out to Department of Health. We've had some good conversations there. I've been speaking with folks in the community, and there's a lot of work to be done, but I think that we're opening up some better lines of communication, and I'm looking forward to maintaining that positive relationship there. And then the other thing that we're looking at, if you haven't seen or heard, is we're going to be talking about federalization in the near future. We're trying out a new outreach concept. It's called the World Cafe model. It's going to be a larger type of meeting with industry members and having breakout groups, and then people can come back and share some of the work that they were doing in those breakout groups. And that's a little bit different than what we've done in deliberative dialogues and listen and learn. So that's something else that we're trying to develop and move forward in looking at as well. The one thing I would point out on the presentation yesterday, and this isn't the top line message for folks, but as we've been exploring different things over the last couple of weeks, trying to really hone in, okay, what's some of the high level issues, and trying to pinpoint it for ease of understanding, because it's a really complicated issue around the cannabinol topic. And we heard in session last year a lot of those, a lot of different analogies. Some folks utilize different other agricultural commodities. And so what we did on one of the slides is try to highlight, what we're trying to do for folks in some of this. One, should it be regulated? And I think that question definitely has been answered, but also how do you regulate something like this? And one of the highlights that we were trying to pinpoint is when you look at alcohol, we have a 0.5% alcohol by volume, makes it alcohol, makes it age restricted, and falls under the regulatory scope. And so how do you determine something like that on the cannabis side? Because the products are very different. You do have full spectrum products on that, folks will use for health effects and whatnot, which has some THC in it, also has higher level of CBD. And so where's that threshold? But I think when we're moving forward and trying to figure this out, it makes sense to try to figure out where that line is, because if we can't create something that is easy to understand, I'm not sure how the licensed community is going to know what they can buy, what they can't buy, what they can sell, what they can't sell, who should check ID for what type of product. And so I think that kind of going back, taking a step back and looking at some of these instead of getting too technical in some of this area is how do we create and define that threshold? And that's what we're talking about in our recent deliberative dialogue. So we had one with the scientists from last year. Again, we're going to have another one on May 31st. And this time we're reaching out to other science folks. There's a Professor Loveridge over at WSU is going to be involved, and we also have some doctors over at the State Crime Lab and State Patrol. And so we really need to make sure that we have a strong understanding of impacts to other areas. And if it gets constructed in statute to the effect of impacting those other areas versus just regulatory sales and issues from our 502 system, what does that look like? And so we want to make sure that we get that full breadth of information. So if you do tune into the May 31st deliberative dialogue, you'll be seeing some of that happening. And then we have a third one that we're setting up in June. So those are the primary areas. And like I said, I won't cover everything that my rules team has also done. And on the public health and prevention side, Mary is certainly neck deep in a lot of meetings. I know that she was developing some mapping, so you would have an understanding, coming in on what our public health and prevention program looks like. And we're one of the only states in the nation that has something like that. And so we're really excited about that. But as Mary was drafting all that up, we were both like, yeah, you're doing a whole lot. We got to make sure that we don't overcommit and underdeliver in some of those areas. So, but we're really excited about that. Mary's doing a great job. But other than that, I will turn it back to you if you have any questions or anything.
Thank you, Justin. Jim, did you have any questions?
No, well, yes, actually, the deliberative dialogue on May 31st, I don't know if I can attend that or not, but if you could somehow let me know how to get that on my calendar. I just looked, there's nothing on my calendar, so I must have to indicate that I want to participate if I'm available.
Oh, certainly. We can send that to you.
Okay, that'd be super helpful. And then the other question I had, so on Monday of this last week, I was able to participate. Kathy made me aware of a retreat, a cannabis retreat at the University of Washington, and we went and spent some time there. And there were some really great presentations there, which made me also wonder about the Alcohol and Drug Abuse Institute at the University of Washington. And if we ever work with any of the folks there, I know they too are doing some incredible work in cannabis research there. So just throwing that out there and making sure that people are aware aware that I do know some of those folks in those areas, and am happy to also bring some of the expertise from the University of Washington, particularly the Department of Psychiatry, social work, and psychology to the table if appropriate at some point.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's really, strong value added, and putting my previous hat on, as I worked with national organizations on the liquor law enforcement side, there has been a strong interest in making better connections and bridges with public health and prevention, which isn't always easy to do on that equation. And I think when we talked to folks up at UW before, and trying to, the policy issues that they can share and the public health or the behavioral health issues that they can share with us are also important that we can actually relay to even our servers out in the communities, because if they can understand some of the dynamics of consumption, it may help them be able to do better assessments in the interest of public safety. So there's a lot of work I think that can be done that hasn't been fully tapped into. So I really appreciate that offer. That's great.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony, General Agency update.
Good afternoon, Member Garrett and Member Vollendroff. I was worried that I was going to mess that up, and I did. Sorry about that. Thank you for having me. My first update is on systems modernization project, which we are spending a great deal of time on, as we always do. We published our RFP a few weeks ago. We had our pre-bid meeting with vendors, and since then they've asked us a lot of questions. By the end of today, we need to answer all those questions to stay online with all of the timelines for the RFP. And our current date for them to respond is the 26th of this month. There has been a request to extend that, and we may end up doing that for a short period of time. We are also, in addition to anxiously waiting for the vendors' responses, we're also going to be interviewing a new project manager. Hopefully next week we'll be able to interview a few people for that position. And we recently completed our work on the quality assurance plan. We have an outside quality assurance consultant who did a readiness assessment on us, and we've gone through and analyzed what we need to do to be fully ready to launch the project once we get the gated funding released to us. And so we are well on our way towards that. We are going to hire some people this summer, some more people to help us with data cleanup, which is also part of the project. And I was just talking to the team about that. It will be a good opportunity for a non-perm job, maybe a summer job for some people who have just graduated from high school or college. It's a fairly simple task once they're trained. So I'm excited to get some temporary help on board to do the data cleanup, because that absolutely needs to be done before the end of the year. We also had a great meeting, strategic plan meeting, a little over a week ago. All of the directors came together. Many of them brought someone from their division to participate in the strategic planning report out. We reported on our strategies and the action plans that we have developed and what we have done to accomplish those actions. We also were lucky to have Jessica lead our group, Jessica Dang. It was the first time she was there to lead our group. And she pulled out 3 themes that she saw regarding issues and risks that we identified as issues or risks related to us being able to implement our action plans that we would like to. The first one was lack of resources. The second one was competing priorities. And the third was stakeholder participation / engagement. And we had a great time with breakout sessions, good discussions, discussing these issues. Most people focused on lack of resources and what that means to our agency. Along those lines, our HR director, Anita Bingham, recently, within the last month, I believe, hired a new HR consultant who specializes in recruiting, Vipin Tripathi. and I'm probably mispronouncing his last name, but Vipin gave us a great presentation on data yesterday at our management team meeting. Some data regarding applicants and regarding how many people apply across various, how many people of color apply, how many whites apply, how many people get referred on to the hiring manager, how many people get interviewed, and how many people eventually get hired. And so we're really excited to be able to see more than 3 months worth of data as he develops that and comes back to management team to show us where we're at. But Vipin has a lot of great ideas about recruiting, about using social media, about using LinkedIn more. And we're all really excited about the work that he's doing.
That's great.
And the last thing I have to mention is that Director Garza and I have been working with Mary Sagawa, discussing with HCA and DOH potential question changes or new questions for the Healthy Use Survey, which brings us very important data every 2 years when it's administered to 8th graders and high school age students. I believe it's usually 8th graders, 10th graders, and 12th graders that get it. There are some different questions that go to 6th graders, but we had a great discussion about what we should be doing for 2023 and even into 2025. And I just want to thank Mary for educating me on this. I was familiar with the survey, but didn't realize how important that data is for communities who are looking for funding. And they often use that data to show what type of funding they need, which was news to me. And so we want to make sure that this survey is something that the high schools are willing to give to the students and we want to get as much participation as possible. And so we had a great discussion with HCA and DOH via email, and I imagine that discussion will continue before the final decision has been made.
Great.
That's all I have.
Thank you. That's good to hear about the person that has come into HR and that type of information. One of the things that I had been looking at and talking to Anita about is, making sure that we're looking outside of state government and not being giving more attention to inside of state government when it comes to filling some of the positions and stuff. So I'm hoping that's part of the data you're going to be getting.
Yeah, that's a good data point that we could look at. Where do these people come from? Are they coming from the private sector or from within state government?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
I think it's also worthwhile to look at the data when we have attrition here at LCB. Where do the people go? Do they go to another state agency or do they go to the private sector? I think can be helpful.
Right. Yeah.
Because we know that we need to not only focus on recruiting, but also retention.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Jim, did you have anything?
No, just thank you, Tony, for that great update. I think we have time on my calendar for a more in-depth discussion about the system modernization project. I hear RFPs, so I'm just throw out if you need a reviewer. I've reviewed thousands of RFPs over my year, so put my name out there if you need somebody. But thank you, and look forward to hearing more about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Around the table, are there any other updates that anyone has? Okay, and Jim, was there any other updates or information you want to share now?
I have nothing for today.
Okay, with that, thank you all. Though there was really good information shared today, and you have what, 15 minutes of your time back. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good day.